You don't read, you're not curious about, kind of what's beyond you, like I said, you don't learn languages. You are so arrogant as to think that you're the center of the world. And then my buddies and I crawled into the foxhole and held the Nazis for the whole night.
I think the mistake a lot of young people make is, what are my talents? What are my passions? What are the social causes close to my heart? What are the problems I want to solve? If I don't get an internship at Goldman Sachs, I'm nothing.
So I knew I wanted to express myself through language. I wanted to make some sort of an impact in the world. I more or less became a Buddhist at one point, like my sophomore year of college.
So what are your thoughts about the future of America?
If we're getting a rise of, say China really taking on its role of kind of global leadership.
With the rise of China, does it make more sense to go to the Far East? There are no solutions, only trade-offs. Who knows how long life spans will be for an 18-year-old kid. I think it'll be longer.
I do not want to, say, waste my potential, right? I do not want to be surrounded by people who don't inspire me, right?
Like, let's say an 18-year-old in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, what advice would you give them? Welcome, everyone. I've got a very special guest today. My friend of many, many, many years since college. He was one of the few people at my wedding. There were about 20 people. It was in the middle of COVID. And we've shared an amazing personal and professional journey over the past 12 years. So with Athena's creative director, Jared, we're going to talk about how college admissions is different now than in the past. We're going to talk a lot about Athena's journey, and most importantly, about everything that's happening in the world, specifically with America, and how young people can prepare for the complex world up ahead. So stay tuned. Alrighty, we are here reviewing the application of Mr. Jared Terrence Griffin. It is 2008, fall of 2008. So let's get started. This gentleman has a 4.0 unweighted GPA, almost 4.7 weighted, 5s on most APs, 4 on calculus BC, but he's applying for English literature because he's going to be one of the greatest writers of our generation, no doubt, and a 4 in studio art. It's interesting. Didn't know that. A very multifaceted artist we have here. 2020 SAT score, 680 critical reading, okay. 670 math, 670 writing, okay. We'll come back to that. Fairly good on SAT subject test, 770, 720, 690 mathematics. Alrighty, okay. But what else has he got? Quite a few activities and awards. An athlete, indoor track and field, outdoor track and field, and everything in between. Kennedy Art Club, right? And an alto saxophone player. Very much the artist. We really got an artist's soul here. Okay, and a bunch of others. Let's take a look at the essay and see how all of this comes together. So from one of the supplements, for me, summertime means one thing. Georgia. It is the home state of my parents and the center of my family. It is a place of beauty where acres of uninhabited land stretch as far as the eye can see. Georgia also conjures up images of enjoying relatives, especially my father, whom I rarely get a chance to visit. I always learn something from a stay in the South. Alrighty, I presume that most people applying to Princeton would be from the Northeast, and elsewhere. This is rare, talking about your experiences in the South. Flying down to my grandmother's house in Georgia marked the start of my vacation last year. Spending my summer on their farm allowed me to escape the city life and focus on my hobbies. I regularly attended my favorite summer pastime, fishing. The picturesque southern environment gave me inspiration to add pieces to my studio art portfolio. Oh, what I love is he is highlighting his artistic inspiration. He flies down to Georgia, rural Georgia, and the environment there serves as a backdrop for many of his studio art pieces. The highlight of my time in Georgia was interning with a general surgeon. Okay, that's very different. It was my first step into the world of medicine. After days of observing office management and treating patients, interesting, I finally got a chance to witness a procedure. Viewing the removal of a catheter, I'm assuming, heart device was exciting to see up close. By standing alongside, I found out the true meaning of precision. So what I like is he's distilling insights from every single one of his experiences, whether it's beholding the Georgia scenery or interning with the general surgeon. This young man is always thinking about, what am I learning from this experience and how can I take that forward? And that's exactly the kind of mindset we'd like to see at a Princeton. For this past summer, I started a new project, painting on sneakers. So I personally love the multifacetedness. You've got someone who's setting up his easel and, again, beholding the Georgia scenery. You have someone who's appreciating the precision of a surgery. And then you now have the same young man painting sneakers. Soon, my new hobby began to develop into a business. So he's got this commercial startup sense as well. Later, I interned once again with the general surgeon from the previous year. This time, I was immersed in the behind-the-scenes action of the hospital. So again, he's trying to understand all facets of the hospital, not just the medical part, but also the operational part. I followed the doctor through making rounds, surgeries, and examining inner organs. The internship was intense, but it solidified my curiosity. The idea of seeing the inside of a body being repaired was fascinating. Reflecting on my last 2 summers, I feel that they truly shaped my interests. They provided different outlets for my art. Because of this past summer, I have a new form of artistic expression through my sneakers, right? Very interesting. Learning directly from a surgeon gave me a totally different perspective about human life. The experience that I have gained has influenced me greatly. I always carry a piece of Georgia with me. Quite sweet. Alrighty. So, multifaceted, reflective, introspective, ambitious. He's not whiling away his summer. He's really attempting to discover himself and his place within the world. That's exactly the kind of aspiration we would love to see here. Lovely. I feel like I know you even better, Jared. Thank you for that.
I'll say, sure, you're welcome. It's very strange feeling to sit and listen to your application basically being read. I'm happy that I did not have to go through that experience in real life. Mm-hmm. It's probably for the better that this sort of thing happens somewhere in a black box that we never get to experience, we never get to see, and then we just find out some result. So very thankful for that.
But I feel like so much of who you are today had seeds back then. We see that. Definitely the artistic flair. One of the many things I admire about you is how attentive to detail you are. Nothing gets past you, whether it's in a piece of writing or something we're designing. So you see inklings of that here as well, at the surgeon's office, the detail orientation, or when you're painting sneakers. I'm sure kind of your aesthetic flair and your aesthetic sensibility really took form in some of these summers. So they seem to be formative experiences.
Definitely.
Amazing. Alrighty, shall we jump to another?
Well then, I think it's time for me to review your application.
Uh-oh.
So, putting on my admissions officer cap right now. Got your application here. Let's see what we've got. So we've got a certain Rahul Subramaniam, a second generation Indian American right? Living in the Northern California region, Fremont, if I remember correctly. And yeah, good school. Generally looking at, grades, I've got, straight A student, pretty par for the course for, people coming from an Asian background, applying to these kinds of schools. I'm going to need to see, all right, what's interesting here? I've got APs. We've got all fives. All right, can't do better than that. I'll say that's good. Again, I'm expecting that. All right. SAT, 400, perfect score, can't do better. I'm also expecting that. All right. What's going to make you stand out? I've got SAT subject tests. Says all 800s, pretty much, on SAT subject tests, which they don't do anymore, by the way. SAT subject tests got taken out of the process, I want to say about 2 years ago, but relevant back then. Also looking great. Applying, if I'm not mistaken, for some form of kind of pre-med, correct? Yeah. Okay. So,
not like you.
Yeah, some interesting little connections here. Go figure. I want to see the essays. All right, what's making this person stand out? I need to know, who is this Rahul Subramanian? So I see an essay that's a little bit longer, and that is partly because the Common App back then allowed the essay to be kind of whatever you wanted, basically. And I'm going to be curious to see what these dialogues are going to lead to. Let's jump in. So it says, under quotes, with an ellipsis, and then my buddies and I crawled into the foxhole and held the Nazis for the whole night. Interesting. Quote, I listened intently as the colonel recounted his World War II experiences. It was like traveling back in time, reliving the moments that changed history for the better. The brave men and women at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Menlo Park had lived through some of the most trying periods in America's past. Now the hospital attempted to repay them for their heroism. Sadly, many had physical and psychological disorders. Their medication was palliative, SAT word, nice, aimed at appeasing pain as opposed to curing disease. Despite the efforts of the doctors and staff, I felt that the veterans deserved better. Could diseases such as Alzheimer's be prevented or reversed? It is important for the elderly to share their lives and lessons with future generations so that the priceless knowledge does not get lost. All right, so we're setting up a challenge here with the veterans, what they're going through, very patriotic kind of an essay. I'm wondering where that's going to take us. So I see spending time with these patients was an eye-opener. I used my newfound knowledge of common geriatric diseases as a framework to study the brain's structure and physiology. Eager to learn more, I enrolled in a cognitive psychology course at Stanford University. Oh boy, wow. It's taking action on it. I found the class textbook, however, dry and unnecessarily detailed. Making a judgment of a Stanford University class in your essay? Whew. Bold moves.
Wonder why I didn't get into Stanford.
Man, there were no definitive assertions, only multiple models that illustrate brain function. One describing memory, another for intelligence, one for mental imagery, and so on. But the brain is one organ. There must be some unifying principle that allows it to operate as a cohesive whole. Man, that's one of those kinds of lines there. That's making me think of who this person's going to become someday. He looks like someone I'm going to get to know very well. Determined to understand the brain better, I outlined a psychological model encompassing the disparate elements previously mentioned. The basis for my concept is that thoughts behave as subatomic particles, moving upward through a figurative pyramid. Wow, fancy. As they ascend, they become more ingrained into the brain's network and possess more influence on a person's outlook and actions. When I presented this model to the class, I received a favorable response. My instructors told me it definitely had promise. All right, someone's patting themselves on the back. All right.
A little too much.
Although this model is unrefined and untested, it demonstrates my love of making interdisciplinary connections. Woohoo, all right, got some thoughts going on here. For example, equilibrium, A principle in chemistry where the forward and reverse reactions gradually equalize can also be applied to history. Okay, so connecting some science to humanities, okay? In every age, there are factions wishing to revert to traditional values and factions seeking progressive change. Both ideologies have pros and cons, and I try to take the best elements of each. By disregarding the barriers that divide society, I have developed a tolerance for all types of people, regardless of their views and culture. So I'm open-minded. Interesting. All right. I was wondering what happened to the VA guys, where'd they go? I thought the essay was about, helping the VA people. Okay. However, the skills I have acquired are but a stepping stone. Literary writing, but a stepping stone. Although much is known, there's still much to discover. To make a significant contribution to medicine, I need a solid understanding of what constitutes life. Ooh, heady. What is it that makes us living organisms and not just festering petri dishes containing rudimentary chemicals? What is it that allows billions of little cells to organize, communicate, and create tissues, organs, and organ systems? It would be nice to have some Oxford comments in there, kind of break things up, just saying. How does the first totipotent zygote divide and differentiate so smoothly to create a marvelously complex human body? Fancy terms again. We know what happens, but we don't know why it happens. All right. Well, did not expect the essay to go in this direction. It is this mysterious yet fascinating realm I wish to explore. The unknown excites me. Ignorance is not bliss. The gradual elimination of ignorance is bliss. Semicolons, right? I'm happy only when I'm doing something productive that brings about positive change. Whether it is spending time with veterans, finally we got back to that. Coaching kids, where would that come from? Or contemplating the nature of humanity's existence. All right. So we kind of, took some turns there. We kind of brought the plane home. We brought it down. Right. All right. Interesting. Okay. So I've got somebody who's definitely a thinker. Definitely has some very high-minded ideas and is very curious. All right. That's what I'm getting here. Okay. All right. I see the potential. I get it. And schools that you ended up getting into, by the way, were which ones?
Princeton, Harvard, Columbia, Cornell, Northwestern, UC Berkeley.
Northwestern. Interesting. Did you apply to all the Ivies?
No, these 4.
Gotcha. Okay, nice. Not bad at all. Yeah. It sounds like I'm always wondering, with Harvard. See, I feel like Harvard's the kind of place people don't turn down. Like it's that name, right? So how did that even?
Yeah, I think that was a tough one. Even my parents were like, "You don't say no to Harvard."
Exactly.
I think when we visited, I visited in the summer before 12th grade, and really loved the campus environment at Princeton. And the emphasis on the undergraduate experience. It seemed like Harvard loved to showcase its medical school, its law school, its business school, and other postgraduate institutions. And Harvard College was somewhat of an afterthought. I don't know if that's the case. I know that's not entirely the case, but I'm sharing with you my underdeveloped thought process at the time.
In other words, kids still apply to Harvard, right?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Great place, but I am so grateful for my choice and the amazing relationships that Princeton fostered. I think. Another variable that I looked at was the alumni giving rate, and I think at Princeton it's through the roof. It's double the number 2 school, and I think that's a testament to how warmly the alumni network feels toward each other. I don't know about you, but to this day, if I get any email from any young Princeton alumnus, asking for advice or coming to India and wanting to experience the sights and sounds, I think I have a 100% response rate to that.
And I resonate with that. It was a very similar kind of decision-making process for me in that I did also apply to Harvard. I only applied to 3 Ivies: Harvard, Princeton, and Penn. All right. And I got into Princeton, got into Penn. Harvard said no. All right. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say I would not have gone to Harvard if I had gotten in. All right. It was my top choice at the time. But Princeton was special to me. You know, I went on a college tour with my dad, and, you know, we drove all through kind of the Northeast pretty much one weekend. And Harvard, I think, it might have been second that we visited. And it was a dreary day, cloudy, rainy. It just lackluster, you know? And I remember we ate at the little place that was right across from campus, and it was like it was a burger joint that everyone said you have to go to. I was like, okay, cool. When I went to Princeton, beautiful day. It was like, I think leaves might have just started falling. The whole campus just felt like it was just magical, right? I'm talking to people. I'm doing the full tour. I feel like, okay, I belong here. But I'm fighting it because I know, oh, no, Harvard, right? It's the name. I need to, go for the top, so to speak, right? And, I always tell, my stepfather, was a very, very strong, pro-Black figure who believed a whole lot in, look, we had not had access to these kinds of places for generations, all right? They explicitly turned us down up until roughly the 60s, all right? So you go for the absolute best that you can possibly get, all right? You go for the top, you go there, you get it, okay? And don't look back was kind of his perspective, all right? And make us proud as a community, essentially. So that was why I was attached. But I knew kind of in the heart, if you will, Princeton really had me, you see?
Exactly. Well, Princeton was number one then, and most years since. So
of course.
From that standpoint, I think that was a factor as well, looking at the rankings and so on.
For sure.
But what did it mean to you when you got in? It seems like it was a family aspiration, had a lot of support from your mom and stepfather. Reflecting back on the past decade or so, what has stayed with you? How has your Princeton experience shaped you since?
Well, I mean, for one, I can't seem to get away from it. Obviously, I'm here. You're a Princeton graduate. The other co-founder, unfortunately, also Princeton graduate. We're working with at least another now at this point, right? And it's just everywhere I go, so many of my best friends come also from my alma mater, and my career has now been shaped so much by it. The kinds of, like you said, with the alumni community itself, the kinds of just relationships that I've built through that, that part has been priceless. Yeah. And I know, say for example, if I had gone to Harvard, I would have had a great experience and would have done a lot of the same things, sure. But I do feel that, yes, the undergraduate experience is the big focus.
Right.
And that's kind of a benefit of not having a lot of graduate schools, not having, the famous medical school or the great law school or something. It's just, we matter. The undergraduates matter at Princeton. And everything else, no offense to the grad students, it's secondary, right? So, no, I definitely feel that. And, I bleed orange and black at this point. So
amazing. Yeah, I think what I've learned is community is so powerful. Whether they're physical communities or virtual communities, and you can get this from your undergraduate experience. You can get this from your grad experience. You can get this from your jobs as well. People love to say, ex-Google, ex-Goldman, ex-McKinsey, and so on. So communities in many ways turbocharge you. I don't know about you, but when I open LinkedIn or something, I see one of our friends, someone we used to party with down the hall, who's now running for Congress or something like that. And that really inspires and motivates me. I'm like, wow, these guys are pushing and always striving to level up. I got to do the same thing. So I think some people see that as pressure, but I feel like it's inspiring and motivating, and it encourages you to always reinvent yourself and stay humble. But what about you?
No, I think that's an important part, because one of the things that can happen, and we've had these kinds of conversations before, is that there's a weird kind of tension between, all right, like you said, the pressure and kind of like some sort of like a positive, rivalry or competition, if you will. And there's also this kind of element of when you get into the world's number one school, right? And you're around these other people who are extremely bright and extremely accomplished, talented, what have you. There forms kind of a certain hierarchy, if you will, maybe a certain, normal distribution, perhaps, right? Mm-hmm. And you've been maybe that, big fish in
the top 1%, and then now all of a sudden you're like,
see, average
at best.
Exactly, right? Mm-hmm. And I can only speak for myself in saying that, I came from, relatively, middle class background. My school was not a great school, but within the consortium of that county, as a public school, by the way, it was at the bottom of that particular school system, but it was still a good school system. So compared to others around, right, was actually good. You see, and scores wise and everything, I did really well in my school. But then, as you saw, like my SAT was not that high, right, and that wasn't something I really had a strong grasp of until I got to campus, right? I knew I wanted to be around other people who were going to challenge me, who were going to push me, right? But then when I got to campus, I realized, oh, well, everyone else here like really does have like a perfect SAT, for example, or, they've really been super accomplished in some other area where I felt like, oh, I've done some local stuff or whatever, but that's another level, you see? Trying to kind of find out, all right, where I fit with that, but also how I want to kind of push myself to, kind of emulate that and, be empowered by that, right? That's been an ongoing part of my life, you see? Mm-hmm. And you can say there are kind of two different arguments where you can kind of go for pushing yourself in that regard. And so many of my friends, a lot of us have felt very similar to the way I felt. And that's what we've done is, kind of encourage each other to go and do better, do bigger. Or you can kind of say, all right, well, let me be where I feel comfortable. Let me not stretch myself too far. Let me go where I so-called seem to fit and, kind of play it safe, if you will. Mm-hmm. And there are benefits to both. Like you said, community is everything. Yeah. Right? It's who you are.
Although I think there's a synthesis between those two. If one end of the spectrum is, oh my God, everyone's gunning for that internship at Goldman or McKinsey. Mm-hmm. I gotta run the rat race. That's one extreme. The other extreme is, dude, I'm just gonna chill. Mm-hmm. I think there's a middle path, and I think that's in many ways the path we took, which is let's be inspired by peers who are totally killing it, but let's apply that in a sphere that's authentic to who we are. So I think that's the balance. I think the mistake a lot of young people make is, okay, everyone's running toward this goal. Let me run toward that as well. As opposed to, hey, starting with first principles, what are my talents? What are my passions? What are the social causes close to my heart? What are the problems I want to solve? And who are the cool people, the interesting people solving that? And let me join them, as opposed to, 55% of the Princeton class is applying to investment banking. I got to do that for my own self-validation. And I think that would be the minus side of community, a little bit of that excessive peer pressure. So I think it's all in how you frame it. I think it's in the story that you tell yourself. If the story is, oh my God, if I don't get an internship at Goldman Sachs, I'm nothing, right? That can lead to excessive pressure, as opposed to, whoa, how can I be inspired? How can I distill skills and qualities from amazing peers and apply them in my own life? I think if you focus on that and just getting better each day, and full I mean, full disclosure, I don't think I always did that, but looking back, that's how I strive to live my life right now, because it's such a blessing to be around people who are better than you in some way, right? I feel that with you, like I bring you a piece of writing and you just poo-poo it, Jared, and I'm like, okay, I got to keep refining my craft, and that's a big part of what life is.
No, I feel very similar in that me being in this environment, right, out of a usual comfort zone in India, working with a company that is, primarily Indian, and with former, I guess I can't say entirely classmates, but at least, former, schoolmates, if you will, right? You guys are much more the, people who kind of manage, lead, make things happen, approach things with rigor. You taught me spreadsheets, essentially. All right. I never cared about spreadsheets. I was a very artsy kind of person, as you said. And I was like, always very abstract and intellectual and everything. And I had to learn, no, there are numbers, right, that need to be addressed, right? We need formulas. We need to actually approach life from both sides, right? The right brain and the left brain. And that's actually critical, right, to success in life. You see? Those things I've picked up and have a whole lot of respect for. But even on the writing front and so forth, you always say that I'm, supposedly, this talented person and everything, but I actually have learned a lot from you. We did the book last year. There were especially, right? The book, right? Yeah, it's a shameless plug.
Shameless plug,
yeah,
yes.
Sure. Truly, I actually found that I was learning things and picking up on how you were editing, say, my words. And I was realizing, what I was saying seemed so clear in my head, but actually was coming out in such a way that the other person was not going to understand it. So I need to kind of tailor things accordingly, you see? And just a little subtle, either rules or conventions or, what have you. I started picking them up, like, how a list works. You want to make sure that the list is consistent in, say, its grammar, in maybe its number, for example, or you want to go from low to high, right? Or you want to go from maybe abstract to concrete. Those things, they're very subtle, right? And I've been kind of picking them up over time, you see? So I'm just really appreciative of just getting to have that synergy, if you will.
No, it's been wonderful. It's been almost 7 years. I remember we first worked on an ATS, which is Athena lingo for application, theme, and strategy. Basically, the plan we outlined for students in January 2018, if I'm not mistaken. I was on the way to the Jaipur Literature Festival in my car, working on that with you. But before getting to another point, I think this connects to the liberal arts tradition at not just Princeton, but so many American universities. We were forced to take a certain number of courses in the humanities, in the social sciences, in math and the sciences as well. And I feel like that really helped us, because right now, in many ways, a startup or an organization is a liberal arts exercise. Like,
sure.
We'll be doing this, and then we're going to hop to spreadsheets and see whether we're all good for the application season. And then we'll be reviewing some legal contracts, and then blah, blah, blah. I feel like in the span of 10 hours, you and I are exercising so many different portions of our brain. And I feel like that was Princeton and generally the liberal arts tradition's insight, that if you want to lead, if you want to innovate, if you want to constantly reinvent yourself, you really need at least to activate every intellectual skill and sensibility and learn how to learn. And I think you're probably the best example of that. Can you talk a little bit more about your decision to come to India? You lived in India for almost 5 years. You're back here now. What was that like, and how has that shaped you? And was there something from Princeton or from your early experience that encouraged you to get out of your comfort zone?
I mean, to be fair, I never imagined, in a million years that would be living abroad, and definitely not in India. All right. Wow. When I was a kid, I just knew, look, I was an American. I would always be an American. I would be living in America and build my career and all this in America, right? I had no interest, certainly, in trying to kind of live in another place or, live that kind of life, if you will. Sure, I wanted to travel, but, again, coming back home, though, always, right?
Mhm.
And the idea of, someone being an expat, it just felt like, someone who has like wanderlust, right? They're lost, they go and they do their eat, pray, love, and then, they come back home or something. And the strange thing that happened, I think, was, we both were pre-med, as you said, and we both essentially moved on from that path because it wasn't us anymore, I think, right? And we were probably in some way trying to live out some sort of script that had been already pre-written for us by maybe parents, society, whatever. And there was more. We were learning new things. We were becoming new people through coming to college. And certainly in my case, I applied. In fact, I think I put down world history, something like that, kind of for Princeton as my top potential major, because I really, I did well in those courses, and I liked those courses a lot, and that was interesting to me. I knew that medicine was not a requirement, as in studying, biology or chemistry was not a requirement to get into med school. Mm-hmm. So it was fine. There was no pre-med course at Princeton anyway. You just kind of took certain classes and, did what you needed to do to have the, requirements to apply to med school. And I did do those things, but, throughout my whole time in college, I was learning, like you said, the liberal arts. I was taking all kinds of other classes. I was being curious. And I think by the time I was leaving, I knew I wanted to write. I wanted to be in some way a creative, if you will, which is obviously a super stereotypical thing now that's very vague and amorphous, right? I'm a creative director. What does that mean, right? So I knew I wanted to express myself through language. I wanted to make some sort of an impact in the world in the fields. I just didn't know how. And I floated for a while, doing other kinds of gigs and things like that. You were a big part of inspiring me to kind of get into a little bit of tutoring, a little bit of kind of college prep, if you will. And by the time you had that conversation with me, I think in 2016, about maybe coming to India for a year, I was open. I said, yeah, why not? Right? It could be a fun experience. I could learn some things. I know that I've got some growth that I need to have when it comes to, the management and kind of, like I said, the spreadsheet side of things, right? Getting down to business, getting things done, following deadlines, all that stuff that was not me at all, right? Yet that I wanted to now learn. And even though it took us a while, that didn't, get a chance to work out. In 2018, we also kind of tried. I think I was evolving now into someone who was curious at the very least and, ready to kind of get out there and take up some kind of adventure that would really push myself, you see? So that's how I always saw it. And yeah, I'd always loved India, the idea of it. I had, so many friends who were Indian American. I had, read a decent number of, books and things that kind of inspired me. The stereotypical life of Pi, right? But I did read some Gandhi, right? I read Swaraj when I was in college, and just the philosophies, all the different religious traditions. I more or less became a Buddhist at one point, like my sophomore year of college, right? So just all this it was influencing me. It was shaping me. It just felt pretty natural, So being here, I mean, it's like a second home now, really.
Amazing. I think this is a good segue into the elephant in the room, which is what's happening in America today. And I know a lot is in the news. I think it's been interesting. I never thought when we started Athena that our little industry would be front page news, but apparently it is, right? I get calls from journalists every other day. Hey, what do you think about this or that? So I think there are two ways to look at America, and I would love you have so much insight into politics and economics and culture. So I'm really interested in your opinion. On one hand, I have seen America continually renew itself, right? Whether it was after World War II, we had the Sputnik moment in which
Sure.
the Soviets sent the satellite into space and America was like, oh no, we got to get our act together. And they poured amazing resources into education, specifically science education, which really took things to the next level. In the 1970s and 80s, if you look at newspaper clippings, they were like, oh, Japan's going to be the new superpower. And in the 90s, with the whole computer revolution, America came back, coincided with the fall of the Soviet Union as well. So are we due for another renaissance? That's one thing. The other argument is that, hey, we're past the point of no return, and maybe America will go the way of Britain, still relevant on the global stage, but not the dominant hegemon it was a century or so ago. So what are your thoughts about the future of America? And we'll kind of connect that to what it means for Indian students and students around the world who are looking to study there.
I think those two things are not entirely mutually exclusive. I think America can have very much a renaissance and still end up being in this kind of pluralistic kind of environment where America is very relevant. Europe, the EU is its own kind of block. And you get, like, say, China especially becomes kind of its own block. And India plays at least a significant part, right? The BRICS really do rise. I think, it feels very unlikely that the US will return to that kind of that former glory of, like you said, the dominance and everything. We seem a little complacent, There's no way to get around it. All right. I came to India in part because I was also recognizing that energy that was happening with the BRICS. And my focus started to shift from being such an American kind of centric perspective to then being at least much more global, you could say. And there is this profound difference between the New World, which operates kind of like this little island and very much thinks of itself as an island, right? And then the rest of the world, which is much more connected, right? All the wars and whatnot happened, Europe, Africa, Asia, right? All of them kind of just mushed together. And in the States, we've been pretty secluded from all that, And it influences our perspective because then we end up with this island mentality and we think of ourselves as so superior and we don't need to learn other people's languages, learn our language, right? Learn English, that kind of perspective. And there can be benefits to that, don't get me wrong, but it's also ignorant, And so many people I've met since I've been abroad have echoed that same sentiment, which is, back home, we think of ourselves, we're so great, we're Americans, we're the land of the free, we helped the world, winning World War II, and then the Cold War happened, and then we ushered this new era of peace and prosperity, and we taught people democracy, these, brutish, regimes. We taught them how to see the world the way it should be, right? And whatever. But then when you kind of step outside of that, people will say, well, actually, you guys are dumb, right? You don't read, you're not curious about, kind of what's beyond you, like I said, you don't learn languages. You are so arrogant as to think that you're the center of the world and the center of the universe and that you always will be that, you see? And that's that blind spot, So I think that we've had something of a slump when it comes to things like education, right? Really pushing for, it's STEM, yes, but it's a certain kind of rigor just in general, That feels like it's been slipping a lot. Obviously, we've been gutting so much of our, governmental processes and whatnot. And it reminds me, of course, a lot of, late stages decline of Rome, right? Fall of Rome. Just a slow decay situation where there's still money to be made. there's still, technological advancement that's been happening that's unlike anywhere else. Silicon Valley is still Silicon Valley, right? All these things, it's kind of like it's not what it used to be, but it's still often better than the alternatives, you see? And when it comes to things like the freedom and so forth, obviously you're seeing in the news so many different problems that are happening with, free speech and, violence and so forth that are happening. From the outside looking in, it might seem that, oh, well, this is not a good environment. I don't want to be a part of this, for example. And yet at the same time, I'm not fully convinced that the alternatives are better, for example, such as, okay, if we're getting a rise of, say, China really taking on its role of kind of global leadership. So it's just to say that, these different environments have their, pros and cons, right? They have trade-offs. I love my home, I love my country, but I recognize its limitations. I, look at other places I've come to, appreciate. And I see, for example, here in India, how you've got a place that maybe in the past for me, I'd seen as, oh, it's on the come up, but, maybe say the education system or something is, there must be a reason why so many kids are applying abroad, right? And I've been realizing, wait. So actually India's system is way, way better and way more interesting, first of all, than I'd given it credit, right? It took actually being in the environment, having conversations with people, right? Really getting to know the truth as opposed to the myths and things that I've been kind of given to recognize actually this is a really rich environment that has a deep tradition of democracy, of pluralism. And that's one of its greatest strengths, you see? There isn't really that authoritarian element that truly, truly kind of dominates India the way you might see with some other countries, right? And I think about that. I think about how, okay, if I were a student right now and I were still wanting to apply abroad, right? Wanting to take advantage of that benefit. Where would I go? What I want to do? I see the case for many different environments. I see the case for Europe, for example, right? Where things at least seem to be a little calmer, right? But then again, of course, Europe also has a lot of challenges with immigration. Its sense of identity, I think still in many ways tends to be, we're white people, right? We're people who, have a long-standing tradition and legacy of empires that we built, and then we kind of let, kind of return to their original owners. But we're still great. And if you're going to come to us, then you're going to have to abide by our rules. You can't be wearing the burqa, right? You can't be, practicing radical religions and things like that, right? We're going to impose a lot of, restrictions as a result, right? And of course, economically, there's, as people are saying a lot, the potential for gaining a lot of wealth and gaining wealth quickly in the States is different from, say, like in Europe, where it's a much more almost socialized kind of system, a lot more flat, a lot more equal, if you will, which comes with its benefits, right? And also its trade-offs.
Yeah.
So it's something I'd have to think about a lot in terms of what I'm after, you see?
Yeah, that's so well put. And I love the balanced way in which you think. So in many ways, one of my favorite quotes recently is, there are no solutions, only trade-offs.
Sure.
There is a value to the state providing so many services, but at the same time, it does douse some ambition that you see in Silicon Valley and in other parts of America. So how do you get that balance just right? I think in the future, what the conversations I'm having with a lot of students and parents is that American universities are still amazing, kind of going back to what we were talking about, and that's not going to go away. I mean, Oxford and Cambridge are still what they are, even since World War II. So I don't see the Ivies and other top US universities going anywhere. But I do feel that young people around the world, in India and elsewhere, and even Americans like you, should cultivate that global mindset. We have a new colleague who is American, living in Portugal, I believe. And now there are so many epicenters of talent developing around the world. Dubai, Singapore, other places in the Middle East. Some that you'll be surprised about, like El Salvador, right? That's they're offering these golden visas for tech workers, who want to come in and do well. I think the government of Chile had some special program for startup founders. So I think it's going to become increasingly multipolar. Maybe a generation ago, if you wanted to do something, you had to go to America. I think that's going to change a bit. So you got to figure out what works for you. I mean, is it Singapore, Hong Kong? With the rise of China, does it make more sense to go to the Far East? You have English language programs sprouting up in Japan and South Korea. So think about your future more holistically, and maybe studying in one place, but then learning about different corners of the world, and maybe spending 6 months to a year there studying abroad or working abroad. I've heard of some of our peers living in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, right? Which again, a generation ago, I would not have thought that Saudi Arabia would have taken off in its own way. So I think to each their own, and just as you did, you have to think from first principles. What are you looking for? What kind of energy are you looking for? And chart your life path accordingly. So it's a lot more complex, but also a lot more exciting.
I agree.
So what does that mean for an 18-year-old today? Like, let's say an 18-year-old in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore. What advice would you give them?
I think my advice, first of all, as always, is clearly identify what you want, which may be very unclear at 18 years old, 17, 18. So then maybe do the opposite and say, all right, what do I definitely not want? All right. And that often helps, because then I know for myself, for example, I do not want a boring life. I do not want to, say, waste my potential, right? I do not want to be surrounded by people who don't inspire me, right? But I also don't want to go broke, right? That's also a factor. It's important to me, right? So when I kind of do these kinds of, little frameworks, if you will, then they help steer me in at least a direction. And I can see, all right, well, that rules out X, that rules out Y, right? But maybe Z, you see? So that'll be the first thing. And then being able to choose, okay, where in the world I'm going to go becomes a function of that, you see? So I would tell that person, first of all, understand, do you want the kind of education that, like you said, gives you maybe, say, that more liberal arts perspective that's very holistic, and by all intents and purposes will probably take a little longer because you have to do 4 years in the States versus maybe 3 in the UK, right? And other environments, I think, as well. Are you focused on, getting done, right, as soon as possible and getting out in the workforce? Or are you more focused on, the growth, the journey, what you get to learn, right? Are you focused on, say, all right, perhaps getting to really specialize and really, hone in on whatever that subject that you're into is? Or are you still kind of exploring, right? The US is good for exploring, I would say. The US is good for giving you a lot of those kinds of perspectives, right? I think other environments are often far better for the person who, especially like, say, with law, with medicine, wants to go ahead and get it started, right, at the undergraduate level and get out in the world, you see? I'd be looking at, all right, when I get said degree, where's it going to be applicable, all right? Am I going to have to get a whole entire another degree if I go, say, I don't know, to the UK, or if I end up living in the Riyadh or what have you? That's going to be a big factor for me, right? Because we know that between different countries, there might be different regulations, might be different associations and certifications and so forth, right? It's that kind of question. And of course, I have to ask the question of, all right, how much of the kind of uncertainty am I comfortable with, right? When it comes to what's going to happen with things like visas, what's going to happen with whatever the kind of political environment that context is going to be, it's relevant, right? So those would be kind of like my top three, I would say, for the most part.
Yeah, great point. I think some level of VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous situations we can't avoid.
Sure.
So I would say I was listening to a podcast between Nikhil Kamath and Vinod Khosla, one of the great Silicon Valley startup founders and company founders and investors. And he was saying, just be a generalist. Like, again, kind of going back to the liberal arts ideal, get as many different skills as possible, ranging from STEM to the social sciences to the humanities. I would add that it might be helpful to build your own brand or ikigai. Like, I'm known for this. I am really, really, really good at X. But at the same time, see how X connects to Y and Z and A and B and C. Because you'll have to keep reinventing yourself over the coming 50, 60, 70 years. Who knows how long life spans will be for an 18-year-old kid. I think it'll be longer. So how do you invest in a foundation that will allow you to keep learning? I think that would be number two. And the third thing I would say is being able to engage deeply and meaningfully with people from so many different backgrounds. I think that's something you do very well. That's something that Poshak does very well. I like to joke with Poshak that he can have a conversation with Wall Street financiers as well as anyone in India, from the big cities to the small towns. So being able to really empathize and meet everyone, as an equal, I think that's such a superpower. And, it might make sense to, I tell a lot of students, don't just hang out with other students from your country, please. Like, sure. Wherever you go to college, it's a great opportunity to get out of your cultural comfort zone, really learn to see things from other people's perspective. And I think that's something that will help you for decades.
Agreed.
Wonderful, Jared. This has been amazing. I am so excited for everything that's brewing at Athena. I know so much is happening around the world, but looking forward to providing guidance and clarity to young people as they take their next steps, and looking forward to all the gyan that you'll be sharing as well.
Likewise. Yeah, should be fun.